Hello, I'm Langston, and I'm back on my channel, Military Election Forecasting. I've been gone for a hot minute, obviously. I keep saying this every time I come back. It's been very difficult trying to, post on this channel often. It's kind of unmotivating because I don't really get as many views on here compared to my other channel, Jinlandia, obviously. So I don't really come on here that often. But I do want to say that, today I wanted to talk about something that's very deep and important. I mean, talking about my home state of Georgia and why I think Democrats are doomed in it, at least going into 2024. So I saw Unbiased Election Predictions make a video similar to this, and I've been kind of agreeing. Someone hit me up today and was talking about why they feel like Democrats could win in Georgia, and I think that's somewhat bullshit. Someone being from Georgia, being from Atlanta, and I would say, I go out of my way to make sure all of my friends and family and et cetera vote. I would say all of my friends are voters. At least the friends, I hang out with. I'm sorry, like if you're not around, if you kicking it with me, like you gotta take your ass to the polls. I feel like that is a minimum in terms of like being a friend. Like you have to be, an active voter. You have to actually care about, the community's issues and et cetera. That's my perception, but I do know a lot of people that I see on social media that I see, even a lot of my family members I don't really fuck with like that, but family members that, are definitely not going to vote in 2024. And I wanted to kind of bring that up because that's a big problem for Democrats because a lot of these voters are Biden voters. You know what I'm saying? Like these unenthusiastic black voters, they are Biden voters. And, I wanted to kind of talk about it. So again, like going to 2024, Republicans have an advantage in Georgia. And the main reason they have an advantage is because like Georgia is a racially polarized turnout state. And I tell people this, Georgia is not a swing state. It is a turnout state. You have black voters that vote Democratic and white voters that vote Republican, and whoever turns out the most is who wins. That's just to put it point blank simple. And similar thing in North Carolina to a lesser degree, but in Georgia, that is something I talked about. I made a political documentary about Georgia in the past. I want you guys to check that out, where basically I talked about Georgia from the Democrat and Republican perspective. And long term, demographically, Georgia is beneficial to Democrats. But in terms of it being beneficial, it's beneficial because of turnout. Without that turnout, Georgia is no different from Alabama, Mississippi, or South Carolina or Tennessee. The only difference between Georgia and those states is that black turnout is substantially higher than the other southern states, as well as Georgia has a lot more educated and college educated and successful black people compared to other southern states, excluding maybe North Carolina. But black people in the Atlanta metro area are very, there's a lot of rich black people in the Atlanta area. While in a lot of other southern states, they exist, but they're very far in between. While Atlanta is known for, being a successful place for black people. It's called the Black Mecca of the country. Black Hollywood, like everything about Atlanta is black success. There's who knows how many HBCUs there are in Atlanta. So again, like Atlanta has always been known for that. So, Democrats have a much higher floor, and much higher floor, much more potential in Georgia than other southern states, just because a lot of the voters, that they're trying to appeal to are more knowledgeable voters anyway. But that presents a problem for Democrats is because without those voters, they have nothing. Like there is no floor in terms of how far they can fall in Georgia. There really isn't, and we saw that in 2022. And again, like I do want to point out that there is definitely a lot of other swing voters. A huge demographic people like to talk about is, oh, these moderate suburban voters in the Atlanta suburbs, which barely exist. Like I'm someone who spent most of my life in the Atlanta suburbs, and I do want to say that I have lived in Atlanta suburbs that have been predominantly white. But as of 2023, there's not very many of them. Like the only areas of Atlanta that really have a substantial amount of white people are the Atlanta exurbs, but the actual suburbs themselves are predominantly or majority black, at least by and large. Like there's exceptions, but the main reason the Atlanta suburbs are trending left is because of that very reason. You go back to 2004, you had George W. Bush dominate in the suburbs, and you saw John McCain do horrible. I want to say that, this is a blue wave year. This is, America's running their first black president in a state like Georgia with a huge black population. Of course, the margin was going to narrow, but I do want to say the first time you really noticed is 2012. Mitt Romney, who was the king of appealing to educated white voters, at least for the time, did worse in almost all of these counties than George W. Bush and John McCain. So, despite America changing as a country, trending to the left, I mean, trending to the right, the Atlanta suburbs still trending to the left. And the main reason they trending to the left is because of racial polarization. Like these states vote based off race. Like, the Atlanta suburbs are becoming a lot more black. And when you have a demographic that breaks 90-10 growing in population, it's going to dramatically shift these counties to the left, which is what you're seeing primarily in the Atlanta exurbs. Like, the Atlanta suburban counties, especially in southern Atlanta, like Henry, Rockdale, Newton, all of these counties, they're mainly based on racial polarization in these counties. And I tell people this, like, Republicans are dominating with white voters in the Atlanta suburbs, but they make up such a small chunk of the electorate, they just don't really matter. So I would say that they obviously have a lot of sway if if black turnout goes down. Of course, they decide who wins the election. But in an election with high black turnout, Republicans don't realistically have a chance. But when looking at 2024, that does not seem like the scenario. The scenario seems very much like we're talking about Biden struggling to turn out his base, which is predominantly black voters. And you have people trying to compare Joe Biden to Raphael Warnock. I do think Joe Biden does have some advantages Raphael Warnock doesn't have. Like he'll be running in a presidential year, regardless of what happens. There will be more black people to vote in 2024 than 2022, so that will help him. But you have to also realize that Joe Biden will never do as well with black voters as Raphael Warnock. He won't ever get the support, the turnout, and etc. And I do want to say that more will turn out, but in terms of the share of them he will win, it won't be the same. So I still expect for 9 and 10 of them of the ones that vote to turn out. But in terms of raw turnout, he seems to be doomed at this point. I see it every day. Every time I go on social media, I see another person I know that's not going to vote for him, and they're serious. They're serious as fuck. Like they're not going to change their mind. And like I said, black people vote entirely based off racial issues. They don't care about other things. They vote primarily off of racial issues. They voted for Joe Biden because of racial issues. So if Joe Biden's not, fixing things in that department, they don't realistically have a reason to vote from their perspective. So I think that Democrats need to be prepared for that. Like they don't have another scenario. We're talking about a state where they only win 30% of the white vote. They'd be losing Georgia about well over a million votes if there were no black people voting. So again, like they don't have another scenario. And yeah, I think they would definitely do better with college educated white voters in the Atlanta suburbs, but they make up such a small chunk of the population. And regardless, Trump is still going to dominate with them. Like he might only win them by 25 versus, 28 or 30, but regardless, he's going to dominate with them. Black people don't give a damn that Trump got arrested. They don't care about, the fact that he has mugshots. They don't care about any of that. They hated him. They always hated him. So, of course, they're happy that he's going to jail, but regardless, they're not going to vote for Joe Biden because of that. They're not. So, white liberals and Democrats need to understand that. Like, they're not going to vote for Joe Biden regardless of the circumstances. So, because of that, unless something dramatic changes, at least as of now, Joe Biden and Democrats are really screwed in Georgia. But I think that goes long term, regardless of the candidate. Realistically, without a black candidate, Democrats just really struggle in Georgia and period. Because that's a problem for John Ossoff in the future, is because these voters usually turn out for their own representation. That's another huge thing. In a state like Georgia, like you don't have any voters to counteract them. You don't. So that's going to be a huge problem going forward because, you're not going to ever net enough votes in the other counties to offset, your predominant group that supports you. 6 and 10 votes in Georgia come from black voters, at least on the Democratic side. You can't replace that. You know what I'm saying? All your other demographics in the state put together don't even equal that. So I think it's just very gaslighting to sit up here and act like, Democrats aren't in a bad situation in Georgia. And I also want to say, I've heard people say, oh, oh, there's all these other scenarios, there's all these other demographics, which isn't even true. Like you can't back that up with facts. I hear people saying, oh, all this stuff in the media, like, no, it's very much true. I don't think that you'll ever see Republicans dramatically improve with black voters, but in terms of turnout, they're not going to turn out for Joe Biden. And if they don't do that, at least in states like Georgia and also Wisconsin, Democrats don't realistically have a reasonable shot at winning. So again, that's all I have to say about, this video about talking about Georgia politically, talking about why I think Joe Biden is doomed in the state. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. Make sure to have a nice day, you guys. Please like, comment, and subscribe down below and have a nice day, you guys. Goodbye.